How does somebody get BPD? So I don't know about you, but a lot of people who are drawn to DBT or referred for DBT have been diagnosed at some point with borderline personality disorder. So how does that happen? Well, it can be a lot of things, but some of the things are you're an emotionally sensitive child born into an invalidating environment. So an invalidating environment can mean something as simple as just having parents who are really struggling to manage your big feelings. And they may be incredibly well-intentioned, but they get overwhelmed by the big feelings. And then they have big feelings that overwhelm them. And then you get this escalation of behavior where child is having a big emotional response to something, parent feels like things are out of control and has a big emotional response, child has a bigger response, parent has a bigger response, and it just grows and grows and grows. Also the other way around, right? Child can be responding to parents' big emotions about something, and then that response creates an escalation of behavior. And you can end up in an escalation of behavior to the point where in order to deal with the unbearable pain that someone is living with because of all of that sensitivity and all of that invalidation, that the pain becomes so unbearable that we turn to really unskillful means to manage it. So sometimes invalidation can look like severe physical sexual abuse. Sometimes invalidation can just be about cross purposes and misunderstandings. Either way, it leads to this escalation of pain, which leads to an escalation of behaviors. So one of the things about BPD that's so interesting to me is how subjective all of the criteria are for getting that diagnosis. What actually is chronic feelings of emptiness? Well, I think anyone who's experienced chronic feelings of emptiness knows what that feels like, knows what that is, but other people have no idea what that is. But my experience with DBT has been really profound because I've found that people come into DBT with a BPD diagnosis, but over time, as they use skills, they no longer meet criteria because they're not having these explosive feelings of explosive anger. Maybe they're not having as much paranoid ideation or dissociation. Maybe their moods are not vacillating as intensely and quickly, or they're no longer going from idealization to devaluation because they've become more dialectical. Or even maybe they're not struggling with the same fear of abandonment, or at least if they have fears of abandonment, they're responding really skillfully to those fears. And they stop meeting criteria for BPD, which is so interesting to me because technically, borderline personality disorder and other personality disorders are supposed to be uncurable. But again and again, I've seen people no longer meet criteria for the diagnosis. Even though they'll call me and they'll be like, I had a BPD moment where, they acted out in some way. But I'm like, you know what? Everyone has those moments. That's not a syndrome. So to me, there's just a lot of hope in that, in sort of understanding where the roots of those behaviors come from and how you can apply skills to completely change them in so many profound